listener production. Hello, Sasha Barbagat with you. Welcome to The Briefing. Most of us have been listening to music through Apple Music or Spotify for years now, but these platforms are not neutral. They're massive businesses with a vested interest in keeping you listening.
So you as a listener don't know whether a song that gets played to you has been influenced by somebody agreeing for money not to change hands, which is the new version of money changing hands. When I was at Spotify, I fought bitterly against that aspect of it.
In a two-part special from The Briefing today, Bension Siebert finds out how streaming services can influence our taste in music, what we can do about it, and what happens behind closed doors to make a song go viral. Before all that, though, let's get into the headlines with Chris Spiru. It is Tuesday, January 28.
Morning, Sash. Morning, everybody. Australia's road toll has hit a 12-year high with 1,300 people dying on our roads in 2024. It's the deadliest year on our roads since 2012 and 18.5% higher than 2021 when a 10-year plan to halve road deaths was introduced.
These figures clearly show our current approach to road safety is failing. Our cars have never been safer, yet we have a soaring road toll that's breaking decades-old records.
That's Michael Bradley from the Australian Automobile Association speaking with the Listener newsroom there. Interestingly, the data breakdown from the AAA has revealed that while driver and passenger deaths slightly dipped last year, it became deadlier for other road users, including pedestrians and cyclists. They saw a 7% and 11% increase in deaths, respectively, while motorcyclist fatalities rose by 10.5%.
Yeah, they're not good stats, Chris. And I guess the question then is what's behind the trend? And the short answer is people don't know. There's not one thing we can point to and say, oh, it's this. But academics are pointing to a number of possible factors. So they include things like road quality, speed limits being too high on small and regional roads, a rise in SUV ownership, which I found really interesting, and even an increase in impatience behind the wheel, which is a hangover from the empty streets we got used to during COVID. The AAA, which has released the data, is continuing to pressure the federal government for better information about fatalities and serious injuries as part of the fight to decrease the road toll. It also wants the states and territories to provide better data to Canberra and for that to determine what roads are prioritised for federal funding. Now, that's interesting because we are in a federal election year and we saw just the other week a huge sum of money promised by Labor for the Bruce Highway in Queensland, which it's not to say that that road isn't worthy, but there are questions of whether governments use road funding as a pork barrelling method, essentially a way to win votes, to say, hey, we're coming to your state, we're coming to your town, and we're going to give you all this money. It's not about fixing the road that is most in need or most worthy. It's just about winning votes in a particular electorate. So an interesting position from the AAA there.
Australians are spending more on dental care than most citizens from other countries within the OECD. Analysis of 31 countries part of the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, including Japan, France and Germany, shows we rank 6th when it comes to per capita expenditure on dental, while the bulk of the $11.1 billion we do spend is individually funded. Only $2.3 billion of that is paid for by federal, state or territory governments, Sash.
Yeah, what's the reason our out-of-pocket is so high? Well, it's a pretty straightforward answer, actually. It's because dental sits outside of Medicare, and experts say many Australians can't afford to visit the dentist, which has been evidenced in a national rise in untreated dental decay and other oral health problems. The Grattan Institute says the share a patient pays for dental care is 9 times higher than a GP visit and 5 times higher than for medicines covered by the PBS.
Yeah, and just a note there on the government funding, especially when it comes to federal government funding, more than half of what the government does spend on dental services goes towards subsidising private health insurance, essentially going towards premium rebates. So most Australians with private health insurance receive a private health insurance rebate, and that's about 50% of our population. And essentially that's a contribution from government based on income, age and family status that helps, everyday Aussies cover their premiums. Experts say while the rebate exists to help relieve our public health system, allocating funding here really only benefits those who can access private health cover, essentially those who have the money to do so.
Yeah.
So it doesn't actually help those who need it the most. Interestingly, in this space, when we talk about Medicare and dental, this is a recommendation of a 2023 Senate inquiry where calls were made for universal access to dental healthcare, whether through Medicare or a similar scheme. Interestingly, the Greens have got those plans underway, and we spoke to Jordan Steele-John, the Green Senator from Western Australia, about the Greens' case with Medicare and dental back in September last year. I will pop the link in the show notes now.
Donald Trump is continuing to flourish his pen and is expected to sign executive orders today banning transgender people from serving in the US military. On his first day in office last week, Trump signed an order revoking the Biden administration's 2021 directive, which allowed trans people to serve openly in the military. But these new orders that he's signing today will go further. They'll lay out military standards on pronouns and gender identity and directly prohibit thousands of trans service members from the military.
This latest order will also gut diversity, equity and inclusion, or DEI, programs in the military and reinstate members with back pay who were discharged for refusing to get a COVID vaccine. The White House is justifying the trans order with claims soldiers who have been through gender-reaffirming surgery are not physically or mentally able to serve as long as 12 months after a procedure.
Yeah, and Trump's latest order also directs his new Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, to ban the use of invented and identification-based pronouns in the armed forces, that's a quote, prohibits biological males and females from sleeping, changing and using bathing facilities intended for the opposite sex, and also directs a ban on race or sex-based preferences by any element of the armed forces, the Department of Defense or the Department of Homeland Security. And all instances of discrimination that are based on DEI practices will be subject to an internal review by Hegseth himself, according to the document. So, as I said, he's flourishing his pen. He is making all these changes to the military. This has been kind of one of those culture wars issues with, the woke agenda, quote unquote. And Trump is really gutting a lot of those DEI programs, as we can see in what's going to be included in these orders. And also this banning of trans service members. Apparently, it's not going to immediately impact anyone who is trans and who is serving, but I'm sure there are a lot of people who are feeling really uncomfortable about this in the US and are watching on worried about what it might mean for them.
And you might have heard about Geelong and Sydney's stinky flowers. Now New York is getting in on the action. Last year, thousands of people flocked to the Geelong Botanic Gardens to catch a glimpse and a whiff of a corpse flower, which was blooming for the first time. Yes, you heard that right, a corpse flower. Last week, the same happened in Sydney, with 20,000 people rushing to the city's Botanic Gardens to see and smell Patricia, which was flowering for the first time in a decade. Live streams of both events also racked up hundreds of thousands of views. Now, thousands are queuing at Brooklyn's Botanic Gardens to see the corpse flower there, which is opening for the first time since it arrived in 2018.
Yeah, so people we're in Sydney, Chris, we saw the hype around the corpse flower. I also saw what was happening in Geelong at the end of last year. I saw radio stations doing shows from the corpse flower. So you might, if you're sitting outside these cities, you might be going, what on earth is this corpse flower? It's called the Titan arum, commonly known as the corpse flower, and is native only to the rainforests of Western Sumatra in Indonesia. Now, what makes it so famous? It's huge. It's very big. It's quite beautiful in kind of a creepy way. I think because of the name corpse, you kind of go, oh, I don't know. There's this weird correlation with the name and the smell, I suppose, which is apparently reminiscent of rotting flesh when it blooms, and that then attracts pollinators. But I love seeing people just, get excited about something that seems so silly. It actually reminds me, or it got me thinking of the live streams that started popping up during COVID when everyone was at home and people were just zoos, for example, were like, oh, no one can visit our poor animals. Let's put a live stream of the snow leopard up. My favorite though was the penguin parade at Phillip Island in Victoria.
So neat.
It happens every night though, and I used to watch it as I was making dinner, and you'd literally watch the water and you'd wait and you'd wait and you'd wait, and then all of a sudden all these ripples would start coming from the water, and it was hundreds of penguins coming back from fishing overnight. It was just great. I really liked it.
Oh, dude, I love that. That's so wholesome. I mean, for me, mine was less cutesy. Mine was more I got sucked into the TikTok live Western Sydney drama. It was almost like a Real Housewives, but for people in Western Sydney, and it was these big players. But then it got really dirty and like police got called and people's addresses were leaked.
Wait, this was a live stream?
This was like multiple live streams going at once. It was like the metaverse of TikTok Western Sydney drama. It was incredible. But yeah, that's what I was tuning into during COVID.
Well, you don't have to wait for another pandemic to watch weird live streams, because I found some
true.
more. There's a camera located at a waterhole in Namibia where the local fauna, which includes zebras, ostriches, whatever's around, refresh themselves. I did have a look this morning. There were 600 people on it. There were no animals at the watering hole, which is sad. There's a 24/7 NASA live stream of Earth from space, which is really cool because it actually shows, the view, and then it says what you're looking at, what time it is, which I thought was really awesome. But this one was the weirdest I could find. There's a Twitch channel which is devoted to a camera, which is at a street intersection in Salem, Massachusetts in the US. Viewers can watch cars as they approach a stop sign.
Wow.
Now, what makes the live stream apparently enthralling to viewers is the number of vehicles that roll right on down the street, blatantly disrespecting the stop sign. So, like I said, you don't have to wait for COVID to catch a weird live stream. Do it now. Chris, thank you. Next up, we are getting into the briefing's two-part special, looking into the business of what makes a song go viral.
Hey, Bension here. Music streaming apps like Apple Music and Spotify mean we now have access to more than 100 million individual songs to choose from. So why does it seem so hard to find and fall in love with new music these days? Maybe it's our addiction to AI-generated playlists that just keep giving us the music we liked ages ago and continue to like now. But will you stop making me listen to 212 by Azalea Banks in every Getting Ready mix or fun workout mix playlist? Yes, it's a banger, but she's problematic now. I don't want to hear it, okay? Anyway, the question is, if these apps keep serving us music we already like, and music we used to like, and music like the music we like for years, what does that do to our music taste? Are we doomed to never grow beyond the established data set Spotify or whichever app started forming about us years ago? And when we get exposed to some massive new hit, is that because it's so popular the algorithm couldn't avoid showing us? Or could someone have actually paid money behind closed doors to give that song more virality than it actually deserves? Glenn McDonald is arguably the global authority on all of these questions. He invented many of the algorithms Spotify uses today. Glenn McDonald, welcome to the briefing.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
What is the purpose of Spotify's algorithms and the algorithms of the other music streaming apps?
Well, commercially speaking, mostly they have the task of keeping you paying, or if you aren't paying yet, hopefully getting you to pay.
Mm-hmm.
But I think most of them in the end, and all the large streaming services, are sort of trying to average out all the things that you might want and give you something that is comfortable, not too shocking.
Mm-hmm.
Most people want to spend much of their time listening to the stuff that they like.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't work for me because I always want to hear new things.
Mm.
If you play me the things I've already heard, then that is by definition wrong because I want to hear things I haven't heard yet.
On just like the most fundamental and basic level, how do these algorithms work and what direction do they push people in terms of their music consumption?
Almost all the things that pass for recommendation algorithms are doing some sort of collation of collective knowledge. So you listen to this song, a lot of other people have listened to that song. They also listen to other songs. So from that information, it's possible to guess, well, if you like this song, evidence suggests that you might like these other songs. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of ways to tweak that process, though. So it can be biased towards popularity, it can be biased towards novelty, it can be biased towards newness or classicness or anything. And so it's the humans who, have their hands on the invisible knobs who determine what biases actually happen in any particular algorithm.
The way that people used to listen to music obviously was mostly through the radio and CDs and cassettes, etc. But arguably, there was a lot more accidental discovery of new music. Does that happen as much with an algorithm that's trying to get you to listen to stuff that it knows that you're going to like?
No, but that's sort of on you, I think, as a listener. If what you want is to discover new things in music, as in anything else, you have to go where there are things that you don't know. Like if you go to your favorite restaurant, you won't learn very much about new food. You'll have the things that you know you like, which is great. And often that's what you want. But if you want to discover things that you haven't tasted before, haven't heard before, then you'll have to go put yourself somewhere where there are unfamiliar things.
Many people just put in like gym playlist or getting ready for work playlist or something, and the algorithm creates those playlists. And I'm hearing different flavors of the same meal all the time.
Yeah.
There's the same songs that I've been hearing for a really long time, just in different ways, in different orders and that kind of thing. What is that doing to our taste in music, do you think?
Oh, it's definitely not helping. If by helping you think, as I do, that people ought to be curious about the rest of the world, and that the interesting thing about streaming services is that there's a lot of music you would not have heard on the radio in the radio era, and you would never have bought on CDs. So to me, that the good news is there's a world full of music, and most of it is pretty cool. And with a few clicks, you can get to it, but you have to know what the clicks are, or you have to do something to randomize your clicks or something. Like, as you say, if you just say, play me my usual things, it will do that, but it's not going to work very hard to force you to improve yourself, because that's not a money proposition.
So this is just the consequences of listeners' own actions, more or less.
I mean, Spotify is definitely encouraging you to do that. They're making it much easier for you to get things that are already familiar to you than it is to find new things. I think they share the blame for these patterns, but you have the power to change your listening.
Yeah. So,
which is different from blaming you, but you do have that power.
So if you want to improve your taste in music, or you want to branch out beyond just like randomly searching songs or music, how would you actually go about it if you were to go through a step-by-step process?
So, I mean, you can sort of do it incrementally, or you can do it through hyperspace. So the incremental way is like, look for the frayed edges around your existing taste. Like the bands that you know that are like a little different than the ones you usually listen to, and you're not sure why. Like that band that has some weird instruments. What are they? And if you go and look, you find, the bass player grew up in Morocco, and so in those two songs, he plays this other thing. And maybe when you will listen to it, you're like, that's strange and not really what I want. But now I understand like why that one song with that weird bass sounds like it does. Or your friends who share a little bit of your music taste, but then they like other things. These are all ways to move in little steps out of your comfort zone. And the big ways are to do something that takes you in big jumps. And so my website, everynoise.com, is a way to make big jumps to anywhere. It's a giant map of all the music genres in the world. And you can, wave your mouse around, hover over things, and hear little bits of it, and it's arranged sort of acoustically, so you can kind of get neighborhoods of different kinds of sounds and investigate. And that's a way to get somewhere. It's like getting on a plane and flying to a city that you've never been to. Although there's a lot of algorithm and Spotify's intention in what you experience on Spotify, there are these little windows into what other individual humans and groups of them likes, and those are always the most interesting things to me. So if you get kind of interested in a band, you're not sure whether you really like them, but you look up who they're touring with, see if you like those other bands. Just like pulling on threads and seeing where they lead.
One thing that you can definitely do with like Instagram, for example, is train it to give you more of what you want as opposed to what you have been getting. So like when I was looking for tattoo ideas, I just kept on searching and clicking on tattoo stuff. And then for 6 months, Instagram was showing me all this tattoo content. Can you do a similar thing with Spotify?
I mean, the best way to do that is to make a playlist that is focused in some way. And then it will not only give you some suggestions at the bottom, but then if you let that play and go into autoplay at the end, it will still probably, if it can, play you some familiar things, if it can find any excuse to, but it will be in the neighborhood of that playlist more than not. So that's your best tool for steering the recommendations towards something specific. The practical reality still requires some work from you as a listener to fulfill the potential of having all the world's music available to you. But that work is a lot more tractable than it used to be.
If we accept that for most people, most of the time, familiar music is better than novelty, or at least we don't want as much novelty as we might like to think that we do. If there's that group of people over here and someone like you over there who only wants to hear new music, how do you use these streaming services?
So I follow thousands and thousands of artists so that I find out when they have new albums, and then I follow the artists around them that I don't know yet and look for other things that are like those things. And I basically every Friday make a list of all the things that came out that Friday that seem like I might be interested in them, and spend the week cycling through it, discovering, some of them, it seemed like I might like it, but I didn't. Mm-hmm. But that one's amazing.
Is the ultimate take that we need to stop being quite so passive in our music listening, and we need to be a bit more active in the way that we go about discovering new music?
I think so, because I think even if the algorithms, even if the companies that serve you the music had more incentive to try to surprise you, it kind of doesn't work unless you want it to. You go to the gym and say, play me my stuff, and you're lifting or whatever it is you're doing, and some song that's completely unlike the rest of your music comes on, you'd be like, algorithm screwed up. But if you are at home, sitting, it's quiet, you're like, I think I'll go look for some strangeness somewhere. Mm-hmm. And that same song comes on, you have made a choice to try to listen to something strange, and you're going to give it 10 more seconds. At least you're going to know that it's there because you wanted it to be there and it's not an error.
This might sound conspiratorial, but there was this idea last year, for example, that everyone was getting served espresso by Sabrina Carpenter. Is there ever any kind of hand on the till in the back end where Spotify is serving you stuff that you wouldn't otherwise see so prominently?
Yeah, I mean, there's a feature for this where you can sort of pay. You can agree to take a lower amount of royalty as a musician in order to have your song pushed more actively in radio and other algorithmic contexts. So you as a listener don't know whether a song that gets played to you on autoplay has been influenced by somebody agreeing for money not to change hands, which is the new version of money changing hands. When I was at Spotify, I fought bitterly against that aspect of it. Like the business aspect of I'd rather have exposure than money. Like that's a reasonable decision to make as a musician if you want to. But the fact that those things are not disclosed to you as a listener is, I think, straightforwardly wrong and bad, and makes, for me as a listener, it makes me reluctant to listen to anything where that might be happening because now I don't trust it.
Is there anything like sort of a just way in which something can get very big on Spotify or not? Like, do great songs win all the time on Spotify?
I mean, great songs don't win in culture necessarily, period, and never have. I mean, it's not unrelated to musical quality, and many very good songs have been popular. But when I worked at the Echo Nest before we got acquired by Spotify. We'd frequently get people trying to hire us to predict hits. And I'd just say, no, it's like, we need money, but that's not the money we need. Like you can find things that tend to be more true about hits than non-hits, but they're not causal. It's like, most hits they tend to be shorter than longer, but making your song shorter isn't going to make it a hit. And there's so much whimsical arbitrariness about what people fall in love with that you can't predict or manufacture.
Is there any advice that you would give to someone who's in a mid-tier or very low-level band somewhere in Australia and they want to do really well on Spotify?
You need to be part of something that is bigger than just you, because until you are super famous, you don't have enough leverage as just you. Once you're BTS or Taylor Swift, then awesome. You can do whatever you want. Until then, you need to be part of a movement that cares about you, even though you aren't the center of anybody's life yet. And so scenes and genres are the way to do that. And not only is it the way to become successful, but it's the way to have a satisfying life, even if you don't become successful. Because most bands are not going to become super successful, just statistically. But you'll be happy if you can look back on like the shows you played with the other bands you met who do the thing that you do. And like you played a show to 80 people in Adelaide and it was fantastic. And like that will be the thing that you can take with you that no one can take away from you that doesn't require you to become super famous. People will try to sell you advice about how to game streaming. Or tell you things to do to hack the algorithm or to please the algorithm or to do this and that. And if they are not things you already knew that you needed to do for the sake of your music and your actual human audience, don't do them. Because the bad thing that will often happen is they won't work. But the really worst thing that can happen is you will do some stupid thing, you will have success, and you will think that it's because you did the stupid thing, only it's just random. And so then you'll spend like 5 more years trying to reproduce that success by doing the stupid thing that you hate over and over again because you think it worked once. But in fact, it didn't. It never worked. You got lucky once, and there was something that you did at the same time, and now you've spent 5 years being miserable and still aren't successful. So just like make music, find people who like it, do the things that actually matter to you and your fans and yourselves, and that will be better.
Well, Glenn, this has been such a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for joining us on The Briefing.
Thanks for having me.
That was the man behind many of Spotify's algorithms, Glenn McDonald there. And that was part 1 of today's 2-part special on the music streaming apps. This afternoon, I'll be speaking to an Australian songwriter who really knows how to go viral. Alex Burnett is the writer behind dozens of songs that have made it into the Hottest 100 and attracted more than 1.4 billion streams all up. He says streaming apps create incentives for musicians to alter their music to make it more algorithm friendly, but that equally, no song is great if it's not authentic. That fascinating chat will be in your feed from 3 p.m. Meantime, if you got something out of this ep, do share it with someone. And as always, for a whole lot of exclusive content, chuck us a follow on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast and on TikTok and YouTube. Search Listener Newsroom. I'm Bension Siebert. Catch you next time.